Hey. Oh, I still can't hear you. I think you're on mute. Yep. Not yet. Okay, let me try asking if I can unmute you.
I
Oh,
got
no.
it.
Oh, you're there.
Yay. I thought I would do this from the Gertrude Stein Salon.
I
since,
love it.
She loved needlepoint
It's beautiful.
and she would really appreciate a reading. So I'm just going to set the music up and stuff.
Okay.
It looks great in there.
Let me just turn on the sharing options. And I got to get the Eventbrite list for Cindy. Hey, Izzy. Oh, I can't hear you yet.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
How are you
Okay.
doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Good, thank you.
So I did have a quick question for you in terms of format for tonight.
Yes.
So you're gonna open up with a hello and then go right into the breath work, correct?
Okay, so you're not gonna introduce.
No, Jen, I think we're going to keep it the way we had it. You'll do what you do, right? Introduce, and then Izzy will come in with some breath work.
Okay, perfect. And then the reading ends, and then I'll read out the breakout rooms, like how that happens, and she'll read out the community the questions for discussion before we go into the breakout rooms.
Right.
Then we come back, then we will do discussion with the group, and then we'll do show and tell, and then we finish with the poem.
Well, I think she was going to do breathing also before
Okay.
and after. Is that
Okay.
right, Izzy?
Yeah, what I have is end breakout rooms and then have the discussion, and then I do the actual like longer breath work that I have written out, and then we do show and tell embroideries, and then I read a poem.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right. And Jen, what the guidelines should be read after the breakout rooms?
Yes.
So do you want to go through that order again so that you feel confident?
Yeah. So everybody signs on. We open the doors and let people in. Then I begin with the introduction. Then Izzy will do some breath work. Then we do the reading. Then it ends, and I explain the breakout format. And then Izzy will give the community discussion questions or discussion points. And then we go into the breakout rooms, read the community guidelines. We all come back. Then Izzy will do breath work. Then the show and tell of the embroideries. And then Izzy will read the poem.
Perfect.
Sounds good.
Let's see.
What's the weather like up in Lone Pine right now, Lauren? Is it super
It's
cold?
It's gorgeous. It was like 60 today. And then at night it's like 39.
Ooh.
And yeah, but it's spectacularly beautiful.
I know. I've been seeing your photos have just been making me long for Lone Pine so much.
Yeah, Mike Prather just took Rich and I out to see one of the oldest life forms known on Earth called the stromatolite. And the stromatolites are known to have produced 60% of the world's oxygen,
Wow.
making life itself possible on Earth. And there's only like 2 places on Earth that have them that we know of, Eastern Australia and right by PPG.
No way. I didn't know that we had them in. Did you know beforehand that we had them in the Owens
Oh,
Valley?
Mike had posted it on social media.
And then you
I was
posted,
like,
I think, an article, right? I feel like I read an article.
yeah,
About the Australian ones.
no, he posted an article about the Australian ones, but then, you know, when I wrote him about it, he said, you know, there are some right on the Owens Lake. So Rich and
That's
I went
nuts.
out there with him this afternoon. It was just crazy to see this like weird combination of like the LADWP rehydration ponds,
Mm.
like in this totally disturbed ecological lake with the oldest known living organisms, these photosynthesizing cyanobacteria,
What?
like all in the same place. And we were collecting like seashells on these edges of this like bluff from the last time in glacial history that, you know, there were giant lakes. The Owens Lake was so giant that it connected, you know, from Independence all the way down to like Cartago.
That's so
And
crazy.
he was telling us that that edge is called a death condition.
That's what we're in right now.
Exactly. I was like, oh yeah, sounds familiar.
So yeah, sounds familiar. It's crazy though how the Owens Valley has, not only does it have that, but it has the bristlecone pine. So it has like all of these most elder kind of living beings.
Well, they're kind of what Mike would call extremophiles. Extremophiles are like what survives when the context kills off everything else. So yeah, there is definitely some deep poetry about that.
No, for sure. Oh, I'm so jealous. I'm glad you've been having an amazing time.
Yeah, you know, it's the Glacial Time Museum.
Yep.
Yeah, we went up to see this house yesterday that was built during the silent movie star era by one of the big film directors as a kind of getaway spot in the Alabama Hills, so called. And it has like these super kind of cool like group rooms, but it's um, on a river that runs straight off the mountain on a creek. But it's just been pretty much run down since the silent movie era. So when the real estate agents come to talk to you, they're like, do you know who slept in that room there? It's like, no, who? And he was like, Humphrey Bogart. When he came out to make Western. I was like, we just want to hear about the water rights. And they're like, and then now there was like, so funny.
Mm.
Hi, Cindy.
Hi.
All right, well, everybody, don't forget to breathe. Don't forget to breathe. We're doing a great job. Everything's going great. Emily's rocking the world. Congratulations, Emily, after 10 days of recording.
Thank you. Made a record.
Friggin' amazing. Good for you.
70 hours.
Hell yeah.
I'm a little bit lightheaded, but very happy.
Okay.
Emily, I'm just checking that you've got the screen sharing capabilities
Oh,
with
let
the
me
Kindle.
try to share the screen right
Thank you,
now.
Tess. Yeah.
Share. Yes, ma'am.
You are
Oh, that's so
you
nice.
got it.
And so have you highlighted the parts that we're reading?
Yes, from previous meetings with Lauren and everything. So I
Okay.
think what I will try to do is find my way with outlining, you know, what we're planning to read. And so there's a little bit of a warning for the person who maybe reading closest to the ending. I'll try and figure that out. Just a little bit of like, we're gonna take it through here, or
Yeah.
two
So what
seconds.
I was
Sam.
to do tonight from our discussion on Monday was basically say that we're going to share our screen and we encourage you to read the text with us. When there's a pause in the reading, please feel free to unmute yourself and begin where the last person left off. So we won't
Okay.
necessarily be calling people out and saying,
Okay.
Jen, you're next. Right, it's your turn. Like it'll just be
More organic.
we unmute. Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
loving.
Let's-
Maybe I'll use the chat bar then to try and guide because we have to be able to signal the people when they stop reading.
Well, generally people are pretty good at self. Like some people. Oh, you mean like
I mean
the
the
last
section.
last.
But maybe
yeah,
I can
yeah,
use
yeah.
the chat bar for that. I'll feel it out.
It's
Or
pretty
if you guys
hard.
have suggestions.
It's pretty hard to use. I don't know if you found this. I find it pretty hard to use the chat bar when I'm screen sharing because I'm like not sure if it's
Yeah, so
coming up or
Emily's gonna do the screen share, right,
yeah.
Totally. We were just
Um,
discussing how to cue people so that they know how far they're like when they're reaching the end of one of our selections.
Well, I discovered that if you hover over the last word, it can change its color.
Perfect. So maybe I'll
You want to give it a try? Or
let
just
me-
play with it. But I discovered at least on the Kindle.
I know that was so cool how we were the other night we were able to do that. I don't know if I have capability for a different color.
Yeah, but I think if you hover over the word that you're on, it'll bring up a menu bar.
Yeah.
And if it brings up the menu bar, I was getting an option for color there.
Let me share my screen.
Oh yeah, you have a different.
Yeah, I have a slightly different kind of interface than you do, so I'm just not sure if I can choose color at will.
Try to go to the word debtors and tap on it. Or
See, these are the
wow.
options I get is highlight or note.
So maybe why don't you just highlight the word that we leave on?
Yeah, I'll do that.
And that way people know where we are.
Totally.
All right, I think it's pretty much showtime.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to get my little highlight cues fixed up.
All right.
1 minute to showtime. It's like the actors before they go on stage. Me, 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 me. Shake it off. Shake it off.
Red
Hi,
letter,
Lee.
yellow letter.
There's a
Hi, Lee.
birthday girl.
I celebrated all week.
Happy birthday. As you should.
That's exactly what I was going to say, as you should. You should celebrate for the entire month.
I actually do.
Good.
Very indulgent.
Okay, I'm going to open up the room.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes just to make sure that everybody gets in before we begin. So it looks like everybody has entered. So welcome. It's so wonderful to see all of you again and some new faces as well. I want to welcome you to the Metabolic Studios Learning and Mending series, now in its third evolution. This time around, we are addressing suffocation, growing through the last two gatherings, the first learning syllabus in response to ongoing racial violence, particularly at the hands of the police, and the second holding space for the megafires that consume the West. And now, with the advent of COVID-19, we feel it's imperative to address the larger reality of suffocation and the need for us to revive our breath. In order to get a deeper understanding of these crises and how they're interconnected, we are building upon the readings in the last two series, Abolitionist Readings by Black Women and Native American Perspectives of Land Stewardship. Since the ongoing pandemic began, we've moved our weekly public studio practice to Zoom, where we've committed ourselves to learning and mending together. We invite you to receive these readings as a deep inhale, and we find that crafting together helps receive these readings as a meditation. Many of you have received embroidery kits from us of native plants representing the food and medicine that Metabolic Studio is cultivating. In addition to those, we're happy to announce other new patterns, and they will be sent out soon. Let us together assemble a co-created embroidery illustrating the central role of breathing in the great web of life. To receive an embroidery kit, please send your name and mailing address to info@metabolicstudio.org. And Cindy will also put that information in the chat bar as well. We've decided to close the entrance to this Zoom space after the first 15 minutes of the reading to protect the flow and to keep a steady breath. These gatherings are being recorded through Zoom for archival purposes. We thank you for co-creating this opportunity to learn and mend together during quarantine. Tonight, we'll read from Astra Taylor's book, Can't Pay, Won't Pay, Chapter 1, You're Not Alone, Recognizing Our Power in the Age of Debt. We will share our screen and we encourage you to read the text out with us. When there is a pause in the reading, please feel free to unmute yourself and begin where the last person left off.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Jen, for that. I just wanted to open with a little breath work. My name is Izzy. If you weren't here last week, I'm new to Metabolic. And so if you can close your eyes and plant your feet on the ground if possible, place your right hand over your heart and your left hand over your stomach. And inhale, feel your chest rise, exhale, and allow breath to enter the stomach. Inhale, let your chest rise again, exhale, and release that breath. And we can just sit here for a minute and do that breath work on our own. Feeling the right hand connect with the heart center as you breathe into your chest. Maybe we switch hands and you reverse the direction of the breath flow, breathing in and letting the stomach rise first. And then exhaling, the chest, the stomach deflates. And if you want to raise your arms up overhead, stretching up towards the sky, maybe bringing your gaze up and stretching your arms out along your side. Inhale, exhale. So now that we've kind of centered ourselves in our bodies or brought some awareness to our body, I will pass the torch back over to Jen, and so we can move forward.
Thank you, Izzy. And now we can actually commence with our reading. So Emily will share her screen.
And I think, Jen, we were going to invite other people to read with us, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So as I said, we'll share our screen and we encourage you to read the text out with us. And when there is a pause in the reading, feel free to unmute yourself and begin where the last person left off. Looking forward to hearing everybody read.
Okay, I'll share my screen. So we're just going to read this whole page. That's the extent of this first section. We have 2 sections for our reading tonight. Let me just get situated here. And yeah, I'll leave this space open for whoever would like to step forth, or shall I start? Or
I'll start out.
okay, great.
Debts held in common. Oh, and again, just tonight, you guys, we've just decided to, like, rather than have a lineup of people reading, to just look, when you're done reading, just stop and someone will just pick up for you. Debts held in common. Changing the world requires more than just a radical vision of a different world. It requires solidarity. The word solidarity originally meant debt held in common. The idea first emerged in the legal books of the ancient Roman Empire. When people held a debt together, they were said to hold it in solidum. In other words, the state of being on the hook, the state of being on the hook as a group was the basis of solidarity. If one individual faltered, the group had to step up, meaning that its members would be either bailing one another out or defaulting together. Thus, from its genesis, solidarity had a financial component that raised the stakes. In this original formulation, solidarity is a common identity and a state of interdependence. Terms like bonds and trust and mutual funds are now used by bankers to describe financial structures and agreements. Solidarity can turn such notions around to strengthen the ties among a community of debtors. If just one of us refuses to pay our debt, the state and Wall Street have the power to crush us. But if we all refuse, the power shifts. This kind of organizing cannot be conjured out of thin air. Debt strikes cannot be declared from on high. But if we see our debts as connecting us to one another and as part of what brings us together in solidarity, then our debt can be a source of power.
Can I join in?
Yep.
Debtors unions aren't a panacea, but they have the important role to play. Regular people can't afford to leave our power on the table. That's why we need to turn our debt into leverage. This is a debtor's double edge. It's a dual power. By design, it can isolate us. It can make us feel alone. But if we think of our debt as common, that your medical bill and my credit card debt are both connected in an exploitive system, even by the same bank, then we can refuse these unjust debts in solidarity. We are indebted together and we can be liberated together. We must build these bonds with one another before we can cut the bonds that tie us to creditors and collectors and all of those who exploit us for profit. We also need to build power. This is why the debt collective is not advocating debt forgiveness, which implies a benevolent creditor taking pity on our blameworthy debtor, but rather debt abolition and the creation of a new economic paradigm in which our individual well-being and shared liberation is a socially financed project. Next.
Thank you so much. I'm going to just jump ahead to the next section of our reading. That was our first section. I just realized I was muted. This is our section here, Debtors Across Borders. We're going to take it all the way to the end of this section. And I'll just leave the space here now for whoever would like to step forward.
In the age of financialization, popular uprisings have become increasingly common. Poor people's protest movements exploded around the globe in 2019. In Chile, the country many consider the birthplace of neoliberalism, an increase in subway fares sparked weeks of demonstrations. Protesters demanded an end to low wages, to mass indebtedness, and to the decades-long looting of their country by foreign capitalists. Their anger has a long history. In the 1970s, Chile was the site of a brutal military coup that installed a US-backed dictator who introduced a series of dramatic free market reforms. In Ecuador, indigenous people and students protested a $4.2 billion loan from the International Monetary Fund, along with higher fuel prices. The demonstrations resulted in violent repression, leaving 7 dead and hundreds injured. Haiti, the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, has also been the site of a popular revolt. After their US-backed president tried to end fuel subsidies at the bidding of the International Monetary Fund, Haitians rose up to demand his resignation. They have also accused government officials of stealing billions in aid that flowed into the country after the 2010 earthquake. On the other side of the globe, in Lebanon, demonstrations broke out in October 2019 after the government announced it would impose higher taxes in order to cut the deficit. Protesters flowed into the streets. I can't read farther. Okay. To denounce government corruption and to demand a complete overhaul of the political system. European leaders have not been spared the outrage of ordinary people. In France, the so-called yellow vests brought the country to a halt as demonstrators protested the high cost of living amid tax breaks for the rich. The police cracked down on the movement. Hundreds were injured, including at least 24 people whose eyes were blinded by police using rubber bullets. The yellow vests were not deterred. Fed up with condescending leaders whose deeds did not match their rhetoric, they rallied at first under a slogan that pitted environmental sustainability against day-to-day survival. The elites talk about the end of the world while we are talking about the end of the month. Demonstrators soon adopted a different, more collective motto: end of the world, end of the month, same struggle. Would someone else like to read?
Debtors unions.
Go ahead.
Debtors unions could help connect the need for an economic system that does not destroy our environment to the need for basic social protections for ordinary people. International organizing to change the power dynamic between debtors and creditors will be difficult, but after the pandemic, it is more obvious than ever that it is necessary. The coronavirus crisis helped to expose the EU budget rules, for example, were always a political choice. Unfortunately, that revelation will not stop creditors from returning to a politics of punishment. Before most countries had beaten back the virus, an IMF spokesperson was quoted in the Financial Times. Once economies recover, he said, achieving progress on ensuring debt sustainability will be needed. In other words, once the crisis passes, debtor nations should prepare to be beaten into submission again by lenders. This scenario is especially troubling considering environmental disasters are likely to increase in the years to come. As Kate Aronoff wrote in The Guardian, if normal was bad for low-income countries before, it won't get better as seas rise. The feeling of being coerced into a debt that can't be repaid and then having austerity measures forced on you is certainly something to which many individual debtors can relate. As the pandemic continues to threaten lives and livelihoods, researchers have projected that massive shortfalls to state and local budgets are on the way. With already underfunded public services like education and healthcare on the chopping block, most of us will have no choice but to take on debt to meet our basic needs. The situation looks even more dire when we consider that in cities such as New York and Los Angeles, police department budgets were swiftly exempted from potential cuts. In some cases, they have been issued additional funds so that cops can work overtime, policing increasingly desperate populations. Many people in other nations have long had to live under the threat of the US military. Now, more and more residents of the US are facing down militarized police forces that are armed with yet vital public services continue to be starved of revenue. These connections between individual struggles, national financial crises, and global events must be identified, magnified, and cultivated as sites of collective struggle. Imagine international debtors' assemblies where all kinds of people, working class people, and their allies meet in person and online to share experiences and work together to discuss what a more equitable distribution of global resources might look like. It is not top-down educational initiatives or paternalistic lecturing that turns isolated individuals into political actors. It is thinking and acting with others towards concrete, achievable goals. Conversations about economics are usually conducted by professionals or technocratic elites using obscure terminology and in forums seemingly intended to exclude regular people. We insist that broad democratic engagement on such critical questions as capitalism, globalization, and credit markets must be conducted by debtors themselves in organizations set up and funded for that purpose. This is a role that debtors unions can play.
We have been a part of these conversations ourselves. As debtors trying to get organized, It took us a few years to understand our debts as collectively held rather than as individual liabilities. And when former Corinthian college students began making demands for debt relief, most of them regarded their problems as individual as well. They believed they had attended an outlier scam school. They believed that they had been wronged in particular ways with consequences that affected them alone. As organized debt strikers, however, former students met with people who had attended other predatory schools and heard stories similar to their own. They also began hearing from student debtors more broadly. It turned out that even people who had attended traditional colleges were drowning in debt. As the strikers' circle of comrades expanded, so did their vision of a world where public goods, including education, are available to all. This is one reason that movement building, the act of sharing our struggles and deciding what to do about them together, is so crucial. Learning can serve as a springboard to action. When we talk about Greece's creditors and the collectors that harass US debtors, for example, we are often talking about the same institutions. Goldman Sachs, for instance, profited handsomely from Greece's financial crisis. It lent money to the country in the lead up to the crash, enriching investors in the process. After the US mortgage market meltdown, ordinary Greeks who were struggling to keep medicine in stock and food on the shelves watched while Goldman Sachs, along with other Wall Street banks, got bailed out to the tune of trillions of dollars. In subsequent years, US debtors watched similar phenomena unfold. Not only did the Detroit Water Department pay $547 million to terminate usurious loans, Oakland, California also found itself trapped in an interest rate swap engineered by Goldman Sachs, for which it had to pay a $16 million exit fee. Though we may live in different countries, inhabit unique cultures, speak different languages, when it comes to our status as debtors, the institutions that exploit us are one and the same. The goal of any debtors union should be to help us to see ourselves as in the same boat and in the same struggle as our fellow debtors across the sea. Okay, there we have it. There's our reading selections.
Thank you, everyone. At this point, before we begin with a large group discussion about the current reading, we're going to create breakout rooms for 3 to 4 people to start discussions for about 6 minutes. So if you don't want to participate, please sign off, as we don't want to assign people to an empty room. And while I'm creating the breakout room, Izzy will share the discussion topics for the reading this evening.
Thanks, Jen. Okay, so I had a few questions for this reading. So on the one hand, if we resist unjust debts, which the text describes unjust debts as any debts that people are forced into in order to meet basic needs, if we resist those unjust debts, we're still operating life within kind of a global capitalist economy that's founded upon colonialism and racism. But on the other hand, we can actively choose to exist in economies of mutual aid and reparation through the honoring of just debts, which are debts that we owe reparations to Indigenous people and African descendants around the world, whose lands and labor were used to fund global expansion of capitalism. So there's kind of this tension between these two economies that are unfolding at the same time. And so my question is, we know that these economies inherently contradict each other because one is in many ways trying to repair the damage of the other, but also imagine a new type of economy. So how do we navigate the complexities of being between these two economic systems? Can our sole existence within the current economic system be one of resistance, or do we go to the bank and take out a loan for a house with the intention of never paying back that loan? Or do we avoid taking out loans at all? Do we create new crowdfunding vaults of capital to share with one another? I do believe in a new economy founded on reparative power shifts and caring for others, humans more than humans, in the life systems that we're situated in. But I just wonder what that interim period may look like, or if it's not an interim period at all. Are we already here in this new economy and we just need to take the leap into fully embracing it? So yeah, those are some questions I wanted to raise for the discussion tonight.
So we may actually be starting the group discussion right here as opposed to going to the breakout room, because for some reason it's not allowing me. So if somebody would like to begin from the discussion point that Izzy just brought up, we can go from there. And I can see if I can figure out why this isn't working.
So it occurs to me that this is where the Buckminster Fuller quote, to change the existing paradigm, you create a new model that works. I don't exactly remember that quote, but the concept is very powerful. Do we have any examples of that paradigm shift taking place and working in various parts of the world?
Yes, there's a bank, a public bank in one of the states, trying to remember which state in the United States. And during the 2008 financial crisis, they were just fine. So it's basically a collective just for people who live in that state. I'll try and find out which state it was.
What kind of model is that, Sylvia?
Public banking.
What are the premises of it, or how is it different from a traditional bank? I don't understand.
It's kind of like a co-op. You put money in, but you sort of know who the members are. But it's also backed by the state because it has the state's name on it. So it's not like a small financial institution that's acting like a co-op. It's both government and public and co-op and and.
How are things like that set up? I mean, how do you go about beginning following that business model or what have you? Anybody hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
So for a bank charter, you need to have $100,000.
Mhm.
So that represents some significant capital to a group, but depending on the size of the group, that becomes less of a barrier. Unfortunately, that then means that you are limiting that to people of means to begin with. Whether or not that, I hope that wouldn't be the continuance of that system. But it's a great question. I'd love to know more about the co-op that you're speaking of, Sylvia.
It was the Bank of North Dakota, and there's another link in the chat from Laura also.
Yeah, hi everyone. It's great to be together again. So I'm aware the last couple of legislative cycles, there's been some legislation in California trying to move this forward. A group out of LA actually really working hard on it. And I don't know, we can look on there and see, I think they're, looking at, resubmitting legislation this cycle, which is now, this month, basically. The thing that I'm aware of, this is very inspiring and exciting. I'm sorry I came in a little late. I'm very excited about this reading and this concept though, and hearing more. The models that I'm aware of are more folks that have considerable wealth, in this new model of transferring wealth rather than creating mechanisms of debt, and it's like, new fund that Regan Pritzker and Amaka Agbo put together around restorative and regenerative economies based out of the Bay Area. And Kat Taylor and they put together this good life pledge where they're basically, I can put information up on here, but that's more for folks that are, aware that the imbalance in their economic, basically finding ways to give back land that's been stolen and give back, money. And they're focusing on Black and Brown communities and Indigenous communities, whose, as we read last year, whose land and off the backs of Black folks, our wealth has been built, and transferring wealth to those communities. And so that is something to look at it, because it's in formation right now. There's 5 different communities that they're doing with that have been pledged this money. So I can put a thing in there about that too, but that's something I'm aware of that just got launched in the fall. The other thing I would add, thank you, Isabella. It was very inspiring to hear from you, actually. And the 2 things that you were bringing up, debt that we are forced into in order to survive, and then for those of us who, so there's that, which is happening with so many people right now because of COVID and all the resulting circumstances, and then debt that is incurred for, modicum or middle class, like purchasing a house, with non-discretionary income, let's say, and then the just debt, which is what you're talking about. So it seems like, it's very exciting to me, to the concept to be organizing around stopping paying debt. And I think that's different than the public banking. Public banking movement is setting up new structures, right? But actually trying to stop and protest the egregious harm that's being done by current structures is a different kind of movement that obviously they're aligned, they need to be parallel, right? But it seems like there's at least 3 different areas of debt.
So just to put a little context on why this book was chosen for a series on suffocation, I think we need to look at one of the questions that has been carried on from discussion to discussion, and that is, how do we look at our relationship to the environment as a transaction? How do we end the transactional nature that we've had with the environment, certainly since the beginning of capitalism? How do we reevaluate and exchange for goods and services that gives back to the web of life? And how do we collectively decide that we actually need to acknowledge a huge debt to the commons of the earth, air, water, seed, and community process? So in thinking about the things we can do in the now, one of the things that occurred to me is that we can think about the relationship between debt and debtors unions and extend upon that to how we all have to, in some way, assume responsibility for the debt we owe the environment. So I thought that that kind of quote, that the end of the month is the same as the end of time, is a very interesting one to think about, because the movement for the environment is often considered the bastion of privilege. So that means people who are worried that they won't be able to feed themselves and their families or put a roof over their head in a time of quarantine. So I think it's really helpful to think about what Astra Taylor is talking about, not just specifically about literal debt, which is important to think about because it's a way of extinguishing or suffocating people's creativity, is to hold them in debt so that they're not able to actually, for example, student debt. If you have student debt and you are going to be spending your working life paying it off as well as the necessities, how does that in a way uplift your education? So is a society stymied by debt right from the get-go?
Absolutely. In debt before you even start making money? That's unfair.
I'm reminded of the donut of social and planetary boundaries. I think it's a good visual guide to our planetary debts.
Yeah, I think the idea of debt as a means of control and suppression of creative energies of all kinds, whether that's in my own personal experience, working to pay off a heavy burden of student loans has shaped the choices I've made in my career. And I've been privileged to have strong options along the way. But also looking at the over extraction of natural resources, creating a situation where the creativity and productivity of nature is beginning to bear that weight and suffer similar breakdowns. And I have been getting through the pandemic doing a lot of gardening. And I'm sometimes just amazed and overwhelmed by the generosity of nature when you put a seed in the ground and get a plant out of that. And, you know, there's labor and capital, I guess, involved in having access to an outdoor space to plant, even if it's just a pot on a balcony. It does require an investment, but essentially you can get something for nothing, it feels like, when you plant a seed and end up with a beautiful vegetable that you can eat. And it seems so, we're on such a perilous tipping point, I think, as far as the ability of our planet to continue to support our way of life in that regard. And the opening of the text with the definition of solidarity, I never knew that it's holding debts in common. So I think the connection to nature, if we can try to hold in common the debt that we have acquired through extracting more than we need and more than our planet can support, that is not going to be easy, but I think it's the only way forward to survive.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that that idea is not it's definitely not mutually exclusive to the reparative debt payment in terms of like the indigenous land that we need to be giving back, and also reparations made to Black people in this country and globally. I think that by doing that and also making power shifts, it will just contribute to more sustainable systems as well. So I think all of this, the kind of debt repayment, it's all interconnected in so many ways.
It reminds me of the colonialism where they would come into a country where everyone had an abundance, enough to eat and drink and live. And the colonial people would create an artificial shortage in order to control the population. So if we can get away from trying to control people, good luck. That's a hard one.
When you
Yeah,
talk
go ahead.
talking about debt and makes me think about how criminal it is that in our country that the minimum wage is what, it's $7.25 an hour, which is the equivalent of 2 gallons of milk. When you think about how underpaid our basic labor force is, it's no wonder that there is the level of debt that there is. It's and I'm really, you just have to cheer on this relief package that seems to be moving along well to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. I mean, it's long overdue. It probably should be higher in metro areas like LA, San Francisco, Seattle, New York, Boston, Washington, and possibly lower in other parts of the country where maybe the cost of living is less, but there isn't, it seems like there's a lack of intelligence and informing public policy with regards to the economy, which is troubling because we've got all these brilliant people studying economics and have good answers, and yet it's all politicized. It's kind of disturbing. The other thing is that in our country, we've moved away from manufacturing and we've just given it over to China, and other parts of the world. And those manufacturing jobs are traditionally the quote unquote lower paying jobs, but nonetheless the jobs that keep people employed and keep that. And so our economy is being based on services and tech. A lot of the tech companies, are ballooning. I mean, look at Amazon getting away with, not paying taxes in certain situations, and their trucks are driving on our roads and on our bridges. There's so many imbalances in public policy and economics, and that it's hard for me to think about just debt as one part of it. It's all
Maria, I think your connection's breaking up.
Diego, what were you gonna say? Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was gonna say that it strikes me that one of the ways of coordinating both the reparative debts and facilitating what I think is a really fruitful way of going is the debt refusal, debt abolishment, is sort of that debt refusal itself as a means of enacting reparative debt from extractive industries that are themselves often the ones or the lenders, the ones that put out these debts in the first place. Refusing to pay back those debts is a way of sort of it's a striking way of taking that reparative transfer of capital, transfer of resources away from the extractive industries, which I think is also something to consider in as far as the ways that we go about organizing resistance or disruption, really more importantly, of the normal flows of extractive colonial capitalism, is we should stay away from I fall back on saying extractive, but industrial productive industries that are themselves responsible for historically creating disparities of wealth, creating homogenization of ecologies, you know, perpetuating industrial colonialism via capitalism. So I really think that the debt refusal is the way to go, rather than, I guess, well then, yeah, that's it.
I like Maria's word, criminal. I think that's a good word choice. Whatever's legal now, that maybe we can make something illegal. You know, charging interest used to be a sin. So maybe it could be a sin again.
And I like your, I don't know, one through line of what you were saying, Diego, just made me think of just the nature of how a debt collective can act as leverage in a system that is ultimately undemocratic, and that has basically, you know, the behavior of all these industries is driven by the dynamic of capitalism and their development under it in different parts of the world, and different, you know, and in relation to each other in this system. And yeah, it's inherently anti-democratic. And I feel like the more of a sense of solidarity in whatever form possible that can act as a leverage point against those forces is something that can provide a not just a counter pressure, but a lasting and deep sort of potential for resistance that can build on itself. And that I'm losing the thread, so I'll let it go there. But yeah, thanks. Great reading.
Yeah, I think what's really important is that it's disruptive of sort of the main economic paradigm, which is to say that it doesn't go through the channels of normal economic reform, or sort of the way that the system encourages change or modification of itself, because in doing so, it like atomizes people. It makes you engage with it through the lens of policy reform and individuals advocating for sort of policies that have to be reconciled with people who honestly should have no say in reconciling them. And I think that that's a strength. And it's another thing to say, you know, how are you going to organize that disruption, that resistance once you get there? But as a general thing, I think that that's a better way.
I just want to jump in with this idea of disruption and kind of point at this idea in ecology of disturbance ecology, and sort of posit that Astra Taylor's book is in a way an argument for disturbance economy. So what she's really writing about here is that any culture does better by the greatest diversity within it. And the debt culture makes us a monoculture, because our time is owned by the lender. So the only way around that is to refuse to pay your debt. And it put the person refusing to pay their debt into a role of a, you know, someone who's behaving disobediently. And in a way, it's a way to consider bringing down the patriarchy in that regard. Is to think about unifying where you can, and where you can is by defying the idea that your credit standing actually makes any difference whatsoever. So if you decide your credit rating doesn't make any difference, then try and get a loan to buy a house. So it goes all the way back to deciding that you are empowered not by your ability to purchase with a credit card, but by your ability to choose not to. If you chose not to, the whole capitalist regime would tumble. That's what this book is really about. It's not about politics happening somewhere else. It's about the power of purchase, and the power of declining to purchase being your biggest power in a capitalist society, perhaps to unify.
And I guess that's where my question about kind of this interim period comes into play, because I totally agree, like declining to purchase, declining to participate in, declining to pay unjust debts, like that's all part of the solidarity and resistance that's really important to beginning to construct or think of new economic systems, or even exist in new economic systems that are anti-capitalist and more about mutual aid. I just wonder, like, then how do we deal with that kind of, like, we don't take out a loan to buy a house, or we don't take out a loan to pay student debt, or we don't take out a credit card if we get really ill and have to pay off hospital bills. So to a certain extent, it's like, how much can you resist when there's necessities that aren't being met, and how can we begin to help each other meet those necessities? Like, how, I think there needs to be power leverage in terms of, like, those who can give more need to do that in order for those who can't afford to resist or don't have the ability to resist. I guess that's kind of my question.
Well, the Buy Nothing Project is about declining to purchase. That's the gift economy. And those who have more give things. It's not usually money.
I think I think one of the most powerful
It's
ideas.
interesting. In
Oh, go ahead.
I'm just a sense of suffocation, that this is a chokehold. This is truly a chokehold. It's difficult even to talk about it. I'm finding that that sense of the paternalistic system disapproving. I'm feeling that even as I'm thinking about resistance economy, very, very revealing in how the system operates.
I think it's in our language so much, you know, credit where credit is due. She deserves all the credit. And I think it's really embedded in our speech and thought patterns in ways that reinforce that paternalistic structure. And it's not anything I know or even can, like, suggest. I have no suggestions, but I would welcome everyone else's.
I feel like one of the most powerful ideas in the book is just this idea of the collective. You know, the book that, you know, is, you know, credited to her and the debt collective. And this idea that one person's debt, you know, can be seen as this burden, but when we look at all of our debt together, and, you know, one of her big ideas is debt across borders, you know, so the idea of a global debt and collective power to collectively organize, I think it's one of the interesting kind of feminist uh, undertakings of the book, is how can we move away from the kind of burden of the individual to the shared responsibility and the shared care ethos of the collective.
I think in the ways that everyone has been saying, all of these different strategies of resistance or disruption should be thought of, I mean, as strategies, not necessarily as single paths to take, because the way that resistance or anti-capitalism so often gets pinned down or drained away is by getting it to stand in one place and sort of make itself unchanging and attempt to like dislodge things from that point. If you have a group of people or groups of people who are switching between different strategies of disrupting economic flows, either through not buying or through refusing to pay debts or both simultaneously, it's a lot harder for the system to retaliate against it, and it's a lot harder for it to nail it down and redirect those flows the way that it's built to do. Also, I guess because the opposite of that is just the way that it normally encourages people to reform it, which is, okay, you want to see a change, go fill out the paperwork, go suggest a policy change, go lobby, go indebt yourself through education so that you can like do it on our terms. And in doing that, you've already lost. You have given yourself into the system and become in its debt, and you have been suffocated, because it's so easy for that to happen, because that's how it's built to work.
I also don't think suffocation in this sense is static. Like, I think it's not like you're suffocated, now it's over. Like, you know, you go into debt for these kinds of things. Maybe you think at a certain point that those debts can help you, you know, bring ease to the collective debt when, and then you feel suffocated after. But I think that suffocation is not definitive. And that's also like a big point of the book. Like, we can catch our breath collectively.
I think Isabella, you took up a good point about medical debt, and I believe that there should be a concerted effort to educate those people who, this is an example, medical debt, say, for solidarity, that they're not, say, in economics, they are not educated in that way. They're not sure how the system works. So there definitely should be a push to educate those people who are in medical debt as to how the system works, the lenders work. Particularly, I think what was successful this year was the surprise medical debts that people were getting, i.e. They were just going into an operating room, saw the anesthesiologist who wasn't with the insurance company, and suddenly got a bill for $7,000, a surprise debt bill that they couldn't pay or wouldn't pay. So now many people got together, educated themselves regarding how the insurance company worked, and so now there's a law that there's no more surprise debts medically. And that kind of thing, I think, would work well if you, in layman's terms, laid it out to the masses. And there's your solidarity of somebody saying, hey, I have this debt, Joe Smith has this debt, they have the same debt, what can we do about it? I just think that they really need to be educated in that. And I'm only addressing the medical issue because that's kind of my field. But I saw that happen, solidarity happen, and there was a result, which is very encouraging that this can actually happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Would you call it solidarity when the Reddit group bought GameStop stock and got all the people shorting GameStop in trouble for shorting it by making the price go up and up and up? Does anybody know about that?
Certainly coordination.
Coordination. Okay, so solidarity and coordination are related. So maybe we need a Reddit group.
Yeah, and that's one thing that the Debtors Collective talked about, which I put in the chat bar about, not the Reddit group, but the coordination about how, like, currently in this moment of time, there are a lot of people all around the globe that are unable to meet, to pay their debts or just to pay their bills. And so turning this like spontaneous, sporadic refusal into intentionality, um, and like a planned course of action and resistance, I think is a cool way to just frame the thinking and the action that they're posing.
I just wanted to make one note about like reparations, and often people kind of get stuck up on the idea of reparations being something that's somewhat impossible to enact nowadays. But like Haiti, after the Haitian Revolution, repaid the French up until like 2005 for the loss of earnings from the ending of slavery there. And so if you think of like the way the debt worked in that direction, you know, it was fully able to be paid by a very poor, you know, revolutionary country over its period. They were able to pay France for this invented money that they were losing out on up until the 2000s. But somehow reparations coming from the richest countries on the planet is somehow deemed inaccessible or impossible. And I think it's really important to remember how invented that idea of scarcity is, especially in the corporate and kind of colonial countries that we're from. So
Yeah, and I think it comes back down to property. I mean, this ridiculous idea of property that we were talking about last time. The reason it was, you know, that there was space for that reverse flow of debt to be extracted back from Haiti was because it was articulated in terms of property. There's no, I mean, the things that are to be repaired, the the things that reparations would need to account for, um, are not articulated in terms of like particular property that was lost from a subject, an individual, a particular, um, sort of reified group within, you know, the state of whatever XYZ settler colonial government you have. And so it doesn't work that way because they won't let it work that way. But really it's the same thing. Resources need to flow back and forth.
yeah, no, exactly. I mean, it's like even if it isn't a body that could receive the you know that the proper way that funding should go back into the world as a reversal of debt, like yeah, it's I don't know, it's hard to imagine how exactly those things work, but we've managed to figure out a way that all of us contribute money to very few people, so I'm sure we can figure out something. And I think that's what these kind of questions ask us, is like it sometimes feels so impossible, but then they've managed to manufacture the most impossible scenario in the world and we're currently living it. So I don't understand where this limited mindset comes from. It's clearly not something that I think originates from us. It's something that's kind of established. And yeah, just to be able to dream of like the idea of abolishing debt is something that could be done, like really not that, it wouldn't be that hard. It's just it becomes really impossible to imagine because we live in such a highly predatory kind of economy.
And yeah, and that's what it's saying. Take money from banks, take money from these people and don't pay it back. And if you can like get enough people to cooperate or to act in solidarity, then you are much better defended to take those actions.
Has anyone worked out the actual percentage of people it would need to take that kind of action for it to be effective?
Well, that's a really good question, and it makes me think of another question, which is, are we talking about a direct making them drop those debts as a response, like an action, and then getting that reaction, or would it be part of a strategy to pressure systems and political representation to have to start doing stuff and responding in some kind of way that maybe there needs to be other forms of organizing in tandem with? I think it's yeah, I mean, obviously we're talking about like enormous systems of power and that are all linked. So I don't, you know, thinking about it myself, I don't see it as a one-stop shop sort of like it's a very long struggle that I think, you know, this is one form of conceiving of, like, the more ways we can conceive of ourselves as a solidarity based class, and able to act accordingly. You know, all the pressures of the system, including debt, help us to, you know, reinforce an idea of us as individuals. You know, the more burdened you are by things, the less you can pick your head up and start to look around and connect with other people and think about things in a larger way. And so I think it's an opportunity for struggle, and you know, time and struggles will, you know, take different forms, which we have to figure out how to respond to things continually. But yeah, it seems like a very rich point of to gather around in solidarity and to make certain things clear to ourselves.
So again, I'm not sure if any of you have this book, but if you do, she does answer how this will work, Olan. And I think that she is saying that this is a kind of bringing down capitalism and bringing down the patriarchy. The best tool in your tool shed is to default on your debt, because she starts her introduction with a big bold, "We own the bank." And I'll read the first you know, paragraph. She's talking about Trump and the whole kind of student loan situation. In early 2020, Pam Hunt got an email letting her know that the approximately 40,000 in student loans she incurred for attending a for-profit college would be erased by the US Department of Education. The Trump administration did not make the decision to cancel Pam's debt as an act of kindness, far from it. Officials were forced to act because debtors had been engaged in a years-long campaign of economic disobedience. Trump's billionaire Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, only issued discharges with what she described as extreme displeasure. So he goes on to describe, you know, that people have the power, not the banks, and that banks are actually not full of money. They're full of paperwork that talks about the abstract series of transactions that we call the economy. So what she's really arguing for is for us to knowledge up about our power, because I do think that this one thing of people defaulting on their debts would bring down the system. So the idea that she's saying that solidarity is an ancient form of safety in numbers, that we collectively hold that debt in common so that no single person can be prosecuted for debt, not paying your debts is kind of like the critical thing. And she's writing this during the COVID pandemic to talk about, like, if things weren't already totally clear before COVID-19, COVID-19 with its nested economic insecurities has really underscored how abrogating on your debt often means that your premiums that you owe for debt go up astronomically, which makes it kind of a complete absurdity. So I really, advocate for people to read this book because it's not abstract. The collective is actually writing out a series of key case studies that help you understand what you're not being told in the news, which is the power that you have in the economy, even if you think of yourself as simply being somebody who has a whole lot of debt to pay. And that's how it works. She's talking about it works by shaming people into feeling like they're not in a position of power and making them feel hopeless in relationship to big picture thinking, like the sixth mass extinction we're living through. So I really wanted to bring this book up to kind of build the bridge between conversations that we're having about megafires of the West and the readings that we were having on abolitionist strategies. The root cause, again, is this kind of suffocation, that the asphyxia of the capitalist regime that doesn't allow, like we all know, you need to breathe in order for your brain to work or anything else in your body. So, her case for economic disobedience is an interesting one. And I don't think she thinks of it as part of a big network of things that can be done. I think she thinks of it as the thing that can be done to bring down the system. And the system being not just the money system, but the stranglehold on extractive industry and the toxification of our oceans and the deterioration of the very air we breathe, our commons. How do we advocate for our commons? Well, we can't until we free ourselves from economic servitude, which keeps the commons from being allowed to have face value that is non-transactional.
Okay, well, it feels like a good point to kind of bring this conversation to the guided meditation I had planned to tonight. If anyone has any other last points that they want to bring in, go for it. And if not, I can get started on the guided breath work.
Something that came up while you were talking, Lauren, about our relationship individually to the planet and our every act that we take was how artists are so inspiring in that way, as a reminder. And just when you spoke, Isabel, it seemed relevant. Eve Ensler did this talk called The Apology, And it started out where she was writing the letter that her father didn't write to her as an apology after he died. And it turned into her apology to Mother Earth for realizing her when she was experiencing the patriarchy of her father to herself. She owned her own inner patriarch to the planet of Mother Earth. And it's a very profound reflection about how we each have embodied the patriarchy in every act we take that is not nurturing Mother Earth. I'll try to find that and put it in, but it just reminded me of how artists are and performance is so important to the inspiration. So, okay, thanks.
Yeah, please share that. Okay, well, I'm gonna get started. So, in the spirit of the collective action and intentionality of tonight, it's my hope that this meditation can carry us to a shared space where we may breathe collectively. So I think there's so many time scales unfolding all around us and within us. And I want this meditation to honor those infinitely complex timescales while bringing us to a grounded place and point in time, the now and here. Here-ness may mean for our physical bodies sitting in front of this computer at this moment, having this discussion in this chair, but I think also here-ness can mean something for our ethereal bodies as well. And our ethereal bodies can be anywhere, and we can be together despite the physical distance that's necessary right now with the pandemic and with physical distancing. So that being said, I ask that we close our eyes if you're comfortable with that. And let's begin with a deep inhale. Pausing at the top, release. Like before, if you're able to put your feet on the ground, please do so. And if that's not accessible to you, then try rooting down through your sitting bones or the base of your palms, or simply sending your energy downwards, grounding towards the earth core. Now I ask that you keep your eyes closed, but with your mind's eye, look down to your bare feet and see that they're rooting into the earth's soil. Breathe. Maybe wiggle your toes around in the soil, feeling the vibration of the earth as you press your toes down. You feel the earth pressing back. As your eyes remain closed, take another deep inhale. And as you exhale, turn the gaze of your mind's eye up and around. You now notice that you're in a forest clearing. Surrounding you are towering redwood trees. And just as the trees around you stretch up to the sky, you do the same. Inhale and stretch the crown of your head up. Exhale, melt the shoulders down, feel the feet ground down. And as you feel the cool dampness of the soil below you and in the air around you, and you allow this coolness to calm your nervous system, take another deep breath. You can feel the care emanating from the trees, and you receive this love and return it with another breath. Now, with your eyes still closed, take your mind's eye gaze all the way up to the clouds and the sun. You may feel a light, warm breeze upon your face as the sunlight engulfs you like a warm hug. You breathe in the embrace. And as your body continues to stretch up with the trees towards the sun and your feet continue rooting down, you breathe in the light. Now visualize the light of the sun entering your body first through your nose. The breath of this light begins to illuminate your skull. With each breath, the light illuminates more of your body, Inhale and visualize the light traveling down your neck into your shoulders. Exhale the light down your arms to your elbows, to your fingertips. Deeply inhale the light into your torso, and as you exhale, feel the light pouring into your heart. Now imagine the light flooding out of your heart as you breathe, and this light that's pouring out of my heart and your heart is connecting. And as we visualize the light and breath of our hearts connecting, and honor that connection that's held between our hearts, continue to breathe and visualize yourself being fully engulfed in the light. Now, I just want us to sit for a moment, be breathing and bathing in the light and love. And this breath that flows through us, our collective breath, is like the wind that flows through these trees that surround us. Now, as we thank the soil for allowing us to root, and the trees for allowing us to breathe, and the sun for allowing us to grow, may we also thank each other for tending to the light and the breath between us. Now, maybe just begin to sway your head gently back and forth and wiggle your fingers and toes. Slowly open up your eyes. Before I read the poem, the Indigenous poem selection for tonight, I'm going to, I think Jen is going to facilitate a little show and tell, so I'm going to pass it over to Jen now. Thank you for sharing that moment, everyone.
Thank you, Izzy. That was wonderful. I am actually coming down to the home stretch of my white sage. And I also wanted to say that I went to the studio today and started opening up and receiving all of the embroideries that everyone has sent back, and they are extraordinary. I mean, I'm so excited. Each one was like opening up a different gift. I'm so excited for everybody to see all of them. So in the meantime, if you have anything to share that you're working on tonight, that would be wonderful. I don't know if my connection's bad, but everybody seems frozen.
So here is, I'm getting a little further along on this butterfly piece, but I still have a whole nother flower down here that needs to get done. So it's slow.
Nice.
Okay, here's more butterfly and flowers. Still working. I'm about to put the bee in it. I'm gonna learn how to do a French knot so the bee's all
Wow.
fuzzy.
That's beautiful.
Beautiful, Olan.
Thank you.
Wow.
I've been weaving together a mac and cheese.
Yeah.
That's
That looks
cute.
really good.
That looks delicious. I've been working on the native bee, just getting started.
Beautiful.
Put it up again. I just had a chance to pin you and it was gone. Oh, that's fabulous.
Well, I think then Izzy, if you would read the poem, that would be wonderful.
Okay, great. One second. Let me just pull it up.
In the meantime, keep sewing.
Okay, I have the poem ready. So tonight I selected a poem by Janice Gould, who grew up in Berkeley, California, but her tribal association is Concal Maidu of Northern California. And Janice died in June of 2019. So just want to honor her life also with reading this tonight. So the poem is called Drift. Clouds form continents overhead, a slow drift that shifts maps of the world over and over. Countries with no mass or weight, borders without meaning, rifts without malice. I could lie here for hours watching clouds come together and tear apart. Wind on my face, my lips. I like the variations of light where it touches the tops of mountains as clouds disperse but persist, causing sudden illuminations of timberline. Or bright apprehension of swallows circling in quick air, vanishing as I watch. Higher, even than those darting birds, an eagle, wings outstretched, seems to coast against hard currents of air. I utter a silent wish or what might be a prayer, not for me alone, but for this place of rock and water, this earth of fire and stone, this time of revelation and reverie, for the consequences of our living and of having lived. So that's the poem. The poet's name, and the poet name in the chat, the poem name in the chat. Anyone wants to read it again later. Thank you.
Thank you, Izzy.
Also, it just makes me think that we can see whatever we want in the clouds. And I think that's a really powerful metaphor for collective dreaming and world building.
Well, thank you everybody for coming this week. And next week we'll be reading from Mushrooms at the End of the World. And we'll be focusing on disturbance ecology as a concept. So if you go to Eventbrite again to sign up, you'll get the page numbers, or maybe Izzy can put that in the chat bar too. So I think it always makes these things more enriching if you have a chance to look at the text beforehand.
Yeah, I can put those in the chat bar. Let me just pull it up really quickly. Sorry, I don't have the Kindle pages, but that's the book pages. I can try to get those and we can put it in the Eventbrite for next week.
Thank you. Thank you, Izzy.
No problem. Thank you.
I have a question, Jen. What is the thinking around, I know you're recording these, or this one at least. I don't know if that's been the practice or not, but what is the thinking around sharing some of this? This was a pretty amazing session and just so pertinent. Not that they aren't all, of course, but
I'm so sorry, Laura. I'm having trouble hearing you.
oh, is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
I think I was mumbling.
Oh, it's kind of like muted and crackly. Sorry.
Yeah, my Wi-Fi's not good. Mother Nature took out a bunch of trees and poles and on the last storm here. No, I was thinking about sharing, this was such a revolutionary, evolutionary session. And I know that you're recording and I don't know what the protocol or practice is around sharing this, what was covered tonight with folks that are in, like I know quite a few people working in reparations and restorative finance and all that. I think this topic would be super interesting to people. So I don't know. It doesn't have to be answered right now, just a question for. I didn't take notes, but I wish I had.
Laura,
I started doing this finally. Thank you for the package I got.
yeah. Laura, I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Emily. I'm one of the videographers at the studio and I help with documentation and archiving. So I just wanted to jump in and say I can look into that for you. We haven't quite figured out the chain of the media yet, but I love your idea to, somehow share it with people it would be relevant to. So I'm going to just volunteer to say I will check on that and we'll follow up with you.
Cool. Very cool. Yeah, I'm part of a group that's doing this series on bringing racial justice, equity, restorative, and regenerative farming together with reparations, kind of an ongoing conversation. And I know that those folks would be super interested in this. So, yeah, okay, cool. Thank you for jumping in. And thank you for doing that work. All right. Good night, everyone. I'm excited to do the homework ahead of time this time. I'll see you next week.
Night.
All right.
Bye. Great to see everybody. Thank you for the beautiful meditation and breath practice, Izzy. I love the sound of your voice. I really needed to breathe. Thank you so much.
Of course, thank you for letting me share with you. It's really nice to have that at the end of the week. I'm sure after all, you're recording this week too.
Thanks, everyone. I really appreciated hearing what everyone had to say. Have a good week.
Safe travels back to.
Thank you.
Yeah, safe travels, Diego.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Well, next time I see you all, I'll be no longer in California. Sad. All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Cindy.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks.
See you guys next week.
Thanks, everybody. Great job.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.